Hey guys, it's M4J here, and welcome back to the Jeffries network on OpenTTD, and we have got a huge time-lapse for you today. I think I mentioned this a couple of episodes ago actually, in episode 191, and I still find the mind boggles just reading out a number that big when I'm talking about my videos. I never thought I would reach 200 episodes, but that is very much going to become a reality in the next couple of weeks. So, episode 191, I believe it was, I was talking about going back to basics in the near future, and also creating some more time-lapse footage for the next few episodes, because as I say, I'm going back to basics, and basics for me is big construction projects. I was watching Lieutenant Joker's videos again quite recently. I went back and started watching his season 3 of OpenTTD, which he does still upload regularly, or semi-regularly I should say. But I do try and watch his episodes as often as I can, and I never realised that about midway through that series he actually gives me a shout out. He had a problem remembering my name, but at the time it was Jeffries, which is, I can completely understand that. I've got no qualms against that. It's the reason I changed the name to M4J, because I know people were struggling to remember it. But he gave me a shout out, and he spoke about what was unique about my channel and my building style, and that sort of made me realise that, a bit like when I was listening to Zest Husky talking about sometimes you get more detail in building the smaller projects. I kind of combined the two. So Lieutenant Joker was saying how I do these massive networks, huge building projects. You don't see many trains actually on the network at the time because I'm just building the lines, and the fact that it's all based on real life stuff within the UK. And I mean, that made me realise that, yeah, that's what I'm best at. And the last few episodes, doing things like building motorways and, you know, building huge industrial parks and having freight trains running in and out of those industrial parks, it's fun in its own little way. It's enjoyable, but it's not really me. It's not what I do best. So, as the title sort of alludes to, we are going back to how it used to be. That's not to say that we won't at some point perhaps go back to doing the big projects in the future, such as motorways, road building, planes, boats, trains, all that kind of stuff, because I still have plans, especially with this episode and Friday's episode. There is a little bit of boatage that goes on between the two projects, which I will talk about more in Friday's episode. But I just feel like I have the most fun when I'm building these big lines with huge junctions and running lots of trains, and this is all tying into my plans for episode 200, because I've listened to what you guys have said. I've tried to combine as many ideas together as possible, as well as creating a couple of ideas of my own and also combining them with the ideas that you guys have come up with, and I'm pretty much set on what I want to do for episode 200, but I'm not going to give anything away until the time. So if you do want to know, you're just going to have to watch the episode to find out, I'm afraid. And that should hopefully keep you guys interested for the next couple of weeks. But yeah, we're going back to basics. We're doing big rail construction projects for the next couple of episodes, and today is the start of that big project. So this is the Great Eastern Line. It's currently called the Great Eastern Line. I'm thinking of actually naming the franchise Guard City Eastern, because it's not really Eastern in terms of the map, but it is Eastern in terms of Guard City. So I think Guard City Eastern works quite well. A bit like London Midland. It's got the name of the city and it's also got the region in which it operates. At the end of the episode you'll get to see the type of trains that I use. That's the next thing I'm going to talk about actually. But I'm just going to carry on talking about sort of why I'm building this line the way I am building it. So we've got the 4-track main line that comes out of GSJ. And the reason I decided to focus on GSJ today is I keep saying that Guard City was finished in terms of metro and overground and the HLR, and I've started working on buses again. I've created all new bus routes, which I will show you in a live episode in the very near future. I did the majority of it off camera because it was all really fiddly and it wasn't particularly fun to do, which is kind of the reasons why I keep saying about going back to basics, because as much as I like giving you guys what you want to see, but at the same time I need to have some enjoyment in it as well. and I was starting to find the road building a little bit on the boring side, which I did kind of mention in the last episode. I'm not a huge fan of roads. I don't mind them, they serve their purpose, but if I had the choice, road or rail, I would always choose rail. But we have that 4-track main line, and I was looking around Guard City whilst I was doing the buses and realised that actually GSJ, it's a really nice station in a really nice location, but there were no trains running from it. And this is something that when I did the big reset many weeks ago now, all the other mainline termini in Guard City got their trains back and GSJ didn't. They were just sat in the depot still, so I did a complete wipe. All the trains that ran in and out of GSJ, they're all gone. And we're starting from scratch. And it's a 4-track main line right up until the point where the livestock trains diverge and go off towards the stockyard. And at that point it turns into 2-track main lines. This is the current northern terminus of the Guard City Eastern line. I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head, so you'll have to see it on screen. It's just a little bit too small for me to be able to read right now. Something else which I wanted to do in this episode, which you are seeing on your screens right now, is I wanted to sort of fiddle around with different station designs. Because it's something else where, again, it's sort of inspired by what Joker said. He never actually mentioned about my station building style. He mentioned that I build big stations, and that's something that I do like doing. Mostly because it's sort of forward planning, preparing for the future when you have lots of trains running in and out of different stations. It's nice to have big stations that can accommodate lots of trains. It's also quite realistic. You think about stations like Clapham Junction, 15 platforms, 16 platforms I believe Clapham Junction has. Lots of platforms, lots of trains running in and out any one time. I believe it does still hold the record for Europe's busiest station in terms of train movements. Most definitely does not hold the record in terms of passenger movements. There used to be a big billboard right up alongside the platforms of Clapham Junction that stated what exactly it was that it held the record for. I'm sort of speculating right now, but I'm sure someone will put me right in the comments. But I wanted to fiddle around with different station designs. I really liked the station that we had on the original Great Eastern Line in the last map, which was inspired by Cambridge Station. And I didn't want to replicate that exactly, because this isn't a 4-track line diverging into different lines. This is a 2-track main line that has terminating services and also through services. This station in particular, it's a little wayside station for the express trains and the semi-fast trains, but for the local trains it's a big hub. So I wanted that to be replicated in the design. So I've actually come up with something that I'm really pleased with. This station and the other terminus station, which you'll see me build later on in this episode, I'm really pleased with the results. This one especially fits that bill. As I said, it's a little wayside station that's also a hub for local services. The other station is a hub for semi-fast and express station services, not stations, which again you'll see a bit more about that in a second. So this station has lots of different platforms. Again, I'm a little bit sort of frustrated that there isn't a new GRF where you could build signals embedded in platforms. I don't actually know if this is possible. I wonder if anyone has ever tried to build a station tile that also has a signal built into it, and in particular a path signal or a signal that you could change, so that you could actually have signals built into the station itself rather than having to build signals separately. I can understand even saying it out loud, it sounds a bit complicated. It's certainly not something I would be able to do. But given how much this game has evolved over recent years, there's a lot of things that I wouldn't have believed were possible, but it turned out actually were. But this station has, I think it's 9 platforms, if you count them all. The main ones being split into A and B, which is why I'm not counting them as separate platforms. It's a bit like some of the main stations. Birmingham New Street's a great example, where it's got platforms split into A and B. So long trains like the Pendolinos, they just occupy the whole platform. Shorter trains like the 350s or the 170s or the 323s, I think, also use Birmingham New Street. These are all class designations, by the way. They all can occupy an A platform or a B platform, and you can actually have 2 trains in the same platform. And then there's a scissors crossover between them, so that one train can leave even if there's another train occupying the platform in front. And that's something that I wanted to put into these stations. I felt like that was giving me better options in terms of train movements. As I say, it's frustrating that you can't build a station platform with a signal built in, because that would make it a lot easier. I'd save tiles, because there's always going to be a 3-tile gap between platform A and platform B, and that's signal, crossover, signal. Or in the case of the station that I just built, because most of the trains will just be travelling to the north or just be travelling to the south that use those platforms, there is a signal, sorry, there's a crossover and then there's a signal. Or a signal then a crossover, I should say, really. You can see I'm doing a little bit more work here. I'm building a depot for some of the local services that we will have coming out of this station eventually. And there's also some bay platforms. That's the thing I was going to talk about. There are some bay platforms in this station. They're all built in the centre. Again, because it's 2-track, it makes it nice and easy to build bay platforms in the centre. I'm still having that problem. I did an experiment at Motherboard Falls where I got rid of the buffer stops at the end of the platforms and turned them all into through platforms, but still built with terminating services in mind. And I tried the diesel service, the DMU service that we've got from GSP to Motherboard Falls. I tried just making that go into the platform and seeing if it reverses, and it didn't, which is really frustrating. And I've checked the settings and I've got it set so that they should reverse in platforms. So my only thought is perhaps Joker's put something in the game code that stops that from happening as a pathing issue. I would have thought that the game's default pathing would have caused the train to reverse, especially as I have got it set so that trains should reverse in platforms. And I thought I had a brainwave, because at one point I just clicked randomly on the orders list and something came up that said reverse, and I got really excited and thought I found the problem. But actually no, that's just for waypoints, so it doesn't actually work with platforms, which again is really frustrating because I feel like I'm missing something. And that's something that I really hate about these scenarios, is I always feel like I'm missing something, and actually the problem is very easy to solve. If I just look hard enough, I'll be able to find out where the problem is. But I don't know, for this station at least there's going to be bay platforms anyway, because why not? It fits in nicely with the design. The other platforms at the new station that I'll be building at the southern end also has bay platforms in mind, and again I've done something quite unique with the design that I'm quite happy with. But I would like to get that problem fixed, because it would make some station designs a lot easier, especially stations like Wenfingfield and Motherboard Falls. It will save me a hell of a lot of sort of platform space, being able to have services terminate that don't necessarily have to go into a bay platform in order to be able to do that. It'll just make routing services a lot easier, and it also means I can start running additional services that just terminate at sort of not random stations, but you know what I mean, stations that haven't necessarily been built with terminating services in mind. I can just say, okay, we'll have a service that runs from a really good example at the moment is I'm not yet running any express services from GSG up the northeast main line, because I haven't got any stations where I feel like the 91s could terminate. So if I could just have a station and get this pathing situation solved, I could start running faster services on that line. So that's a very underutilized line. It's good for freight, and it's good for the airport express, and it's also good for some of the more local services that we've got up to Honningville and Nantburg Springs and stations like that. But once you get further north of that and further east of that, it becomes a bit problematic. So I've done some Google searches as well, and a lot of the results are from sort of 4 years ago, and I feel like I mean, most of the suggestions aren't that helpful, because it's mostly to do with, have you tried going into the settings and changing it? And yes, I have. And I've gone into the settings and just typed in reverse or pathing or stations, things like that, terminating, any sort of random buzzwords I could think of that might be related, and nothing really came up. And as I say, the suggestions are all things that I've already tried, and they're all from a long time ago as well, so there's every chance that the problem that they're solving isn't the same as the problem I've got, because the game has changed a lot since, I mean, one of them was from 2011, which to me still feels like last year, but no, 6 years ago. So I feel like that was a little bit outdated perhaps for actually fixing the problem that I've currently got. So if there's anyone out there who's had a similar problem, it's nice to know that you're not the only one who's suffering with the problem. And also if there's anyone out there who's had a similar problem and has fixed it, one person did suggest the settings thing, which is why I did go and double check that. So thank you for the suggestion. It's just unfortunate that that wasn't the problem. I was almost wishing that was the problem, because then you know, someone's helped me, but not to be, unfortunately. But yeah, station designs, that's what I was talking about. It'd just be nice to be able to have terminating services in stations that are just built as through stations still, not have to have these bay platforms, because then you have issues of you've got to make sure the station's long enough so that the bay platform's long enough, and then if you want services terminating from the north and south or the east and west, depending on which direction the station's built in, you end up having to have bay platforms facing east, bay platforms facing west, and it just becomes this huge nightmare. Wenfingfield is a very good example of that. Think how many platforms are in that station. In fact, Munningpool Falls as well, and actually 4 of them, 2 in each direction, are bay platforms, and just not, you can't use them for anything other than terminating services because there's no way through the other side. But anyway, we're working on the southern leg of this line now. We will have, this is something else that I wanted to try, because I'm still experimenting. It's not like I've just gone back to my old ways and that's it. I am still wanting to experiment, but I'm sticking more to what I know and the sort of things that I would want to try, rather than feeling like I'm having to do things that I don't necessarily want to do. So one of the other things I wanted to do is have, in fact this is the new station I'm building right about now, so you get to see it being built as I'm talking about it. I wanted to try and have a station that could be considered a hub. And a really good example of this is I'm starting to plan out where I want my cross-country network to go. So in the last map we had 2 cross-country services, neither of which really crossed the country. This time around I really want to go for that Aberdeen to Penzance feel of this is a long distance rail journey. And I want a hub, sort of a central hub, a bit like, I think it is Birmingham New Street, is the central hub for the majority of cross-country services. Pretty much every cross-country service passes through Birmingham in one way or another, not just New Street but some of the other stations as well. And I wanted to do that for my cross-country network, but I also wanted to do that for some of my other sort of franchise style networks. So for this particular network, this is Guard City Eastern. There's also going to be a Great Eastern, which is going to be occupying the east side of the map, but this is Guard City Eastern, and I wanted there to be a hub station. And I also wanted it to not be Guard City, because that's easy. So you might have seen, or you will see later on in this episode, I've actually removed all of the depot facilities on this line that laid within Greater Guard City. They've all gone. The one at Guard City has been replaced by just stabling sidings, which again I'll explain more about what those are for in a second. And the original depot that I had as you leave Guard City on the slow lines, I've also removed that one. So all the depot facilities for trains that currently run to GSJ, you're watching me build it right about now. And you can also see how I've built this station design. You can see there are through platforms, there are platforms of various lengths, which is also something else I wanted to play around with. There's one through line that doesn't have a platform, or there is by the end of this. I think I didn't have it to start with, and then I added it in. So there is one through line, so if it's a freight train or if it's a train that just doesn't stop at this particular station for whatever reason, it can use the through line still. There are then 2 platforms to the east of that, or the west of that, because I can't remember which side I built it on. And then you've got the New Street style A and B platforms on the west side of the station. We've also got a long bay platform on the northeast side of the station, which is going to be used for something like an HST. And then just to the south of that, you've got 3 platforms. You've got 2 passenger platforms, which are designated bay platforms, and then you have a central road. And that central road I'm actually going to use for mostly trains doing reverse maneuvers, but I'm also considering using it for mail trains as well. But I haven't 100% decided on that. But I really like this station design. It's really new for me, it's really unique. And it took me a little bit of time to get the signalling working, which is something else that I've become a bit disillusioned with. Because it could well be my signalling as well, of course, the programming of the signalling, which is stopping that trains being able to terminate thing. So I might have to look into that. I'm always best when I've got someone sort of behind me, looking over my shoulder, watching for the mistakes, because I do make lots of mistakes and not really notice. So it's always nice to have someone going, did you mean to do that? Because then I know that actually, no, I didn't mean to do that. Better change that quick, something bad happens. So this station, I can't even remember if I've named it at this point. It's called something quite different as well, because I want to start playing around with station names. I am off camera sometime this week, maybe between this episode and Friday's episode, if not definitely over next weekend, or this weekend, because by the time I'm recording this a week in advance, by the way, which is why my time terms are a bit messed up. But I will start going through the name list, and if you watch me go through the name list over the weekend at least, if not before, you'll start seeing me block off people's suggestions when I'm actually using them. But this station is named after the town, which is Kingston, and I chose the suffix Carnegie, and I had to double check that Carnegie was an actual word first of all, because I've heard of it. I'm pretty sure it's a Scottish word. But then you've also got like Carnegie Hall in New York and other things. And I actually looked up if there was a station called Carnegie, and there is, but it's in Australia. It's in Sydney, I believe. Carnegie Station is, just looking it up. Oh no, it's in Western Australia. Ah. That's actually quite near to where I go when I go to Australia. There is also one in Victoria. In fact, it's quite a lot by the looks of it. Yes, there is quite a lot of stations, or there's at least there's more than one station in Australia called Carnegie. But anyway, that's what this station's called, Kingston Carnegie, which has got quite a nice ring to it, I suppose. I just fancied naming it something different. And you can see here, this is pretty much the final platform design. So the through track is to the west of the long platform. Now the long platform, I don't think I'm ever going to use a train that's actually that length. The longest train, I did some measuring before I started recording this episode. The longest train I believe that's going to use this line is an East Midlands Trains liveried HST, which is 5 tiles long. For the majority of the services, I'm going to be using East Midlands Trains, or at least the livery of their trains, because it's got East and Midlands in the name. And this is kind of east of Guard City, and it's also in the Midlands on the map, so that makes sense. And then there will be cross-country services that run through here as well. Particularly, sort of, they'll be running on this section, and they'll be running up to the other station, which I might as well get the name of for you quickly, because I've got the game open on my other monitor, as I do, so I can check things like this. I'm finding it more and more difficult when I zoom out to actually be able to follow the lines. Sometimes it's easy, sometimes it's not. Particularly as on these routes there are actually quite a few long tunnels, which does make it a little bit difficult. There we go. I found a station, and it's Nut Hill City Centre. That's the name of the station. So between Nut Hill and Kingston there will be some cross-country services, and they obviously will go further north and south as well. But those are the two limits on the Guard City Eastern line as of now. And that kind of leads me on to the next thing I wanted to talk about. I don't like the trains that I've been using on some of the electrified routes, and indeed the lines out of GSP. They are good, don't get me wrong, they're nice models, they're nice sprites, and the trains themselves run quite nicely. However, I find it hard to believe that those carriages have a maximum capacity of 30. And the reason I find that hard to believe is I've been doing lots of research on different train types in the UK, and some of them that I've been focusing on are the trains that run out of Waterloo. So for a good example, the Class 442s, which I believe are being brought back into service by South West Railway, which is the new franchisee on the South West franchise. They used to be part of South West Trains. They got decommissioned, and I believe they're being brought back, which is a bit of a strange move considering there are new trains that could have been used, but apparently there's an issue as the new trains don't have toilets, the old trains do. That's one of the reasons. I think it's also because it's cheaper to renovate the old trains than it is to lease the new ones. But their capacity is 332, I think. I might have gotten my numbers mixed up. It's 300 and something. These trains are 5 carriages long, which means that there's a capacity of 60 people per carriage. Now that's the sort of recommended capacity. I have a feeling though, rush hour every morning and rush hour every evening, there's more than 330 people on those trains. So I do find it quite hard to believe that 300 is the capacity of those trains. I also find it very hard to believe that the trains that I run on my lines have half the capacity per carriage of the 442s. So, where I can, like on this line, and also on the Great Western line, which you will see on Friday, I'm going to be running fixed formation trains. So in other words, I'm going to use the 2 carriage, 3 carriage, anywhere up to 7 carriage DMUs and HSTs and DEMUs, which are diesel electric multiple units for those of you that don't know. I do get told off for using abbreviations that people don't know. I do that sometimes. Anyway, I'm going to start using those fixed formation trains because I feel like it's more realistic for a start. They are liveried, they look nice, they're nice models. Also the fact that there are some routes in Britain, for example Cross Country franchise is a very good example actually, where you do just get little 2-car trains that trundle along. And Cross Country have been heavily criticised for using Turbostars, Class 170s, which are 2 or 3 car trains, to run these big long routes. They do run Voyagers or HSTs between Aberdeen and Penzance, so they do have more capacity. I don't think they have enough capacity though, but they do use 170s for routes across the country. East Midlands trains, they also run a service between Norwich and Liverpool Lime Street, which again I think is just a 2-car Sprinter they use, which during the day when not many people are travelling I'm sure that's fine, but in the mornings and the evenings if you've got to go to those 2 cities it must be an absolute nightmare. I imagine they double the capacity, but even then it doesn't feel like it's enough. So you can see on your screen now on the left hand side, those are the 3 types of train I will be using. In fact there's 4 types if you think about it. Was it the 158s I chose as the DMUs? They run semi-fast services between Denston and GSJ via pretty much all the big stations and a couple of the smaller ones. I tried to do my trick of the train won't stop if the town's population has less than 1,000 people. That's kind of my rule when I'm operating semi-fast services, although with this one I was a little bit more flexible with that rule to try and make sure that the train did actually stop at realistic locations. So it's a 3-car DMU. I've doubled it to 6, so there's always going to be 2 paired together. I'm then running Meridians. They are the Class 180s, no not the 180s, the 222s. So you've got the 220s, which are Voyagers, you've got the 221s, or the 221s, which are the Super Voyagers, and then you've got the 222s, which are the Meridians. I think they are also Voyager, Super Voyager, Meridian. They're all part of the same family anyway, they're all built by Bombardier, I believe. They are exclusively operated by East Midlands Trains, the Meridians. And I don't know why they're called Meridians, because there's nothing, they don't operate anywhere near the Greenwich Meridian, so I don't think it's anything to do with that. And they are, as far as I'm aware, diesel electric multiple units. 5 and 7 cars I've decided to use. So again, with this case, it's a 7-car train. The maximum length of the train is 3.5 tiles, and I do like that as well. I like the fact that even the smaller train that I'm using holds, I think it's 120 people, which is 4 carriages on a normal train that I've been using so far. So I've halved the length of the train but kept the same number of people being carried, you know. And on the train where I'm using 6 carriages, that's actually given me more capacity in a smaller train than if I just used the 6-tile long 12-car DMUs that I've been using out of GSP. So that's why I like using these fixed formation trains. It makes life a lot easier when it actually comes to it. You can just get the train, and run it. You don't have to worry about, is it long enough, is there enough people, is the stations, the stations long enough to carry the trains. None of that stuff matters, because you have a 2 or 3 tile long train. So even the long DMU that I've got that operates the initial semi-fast service, that's only 3 tiles. So I could fit 2 of them into my normal stations. So I've actually gone round the line out of GSJ, and a couple of the platforms I've had to make 6 tiles because food trains stop there, but the rest of them, they're all 5 tiles long at the moment, but I could actually knock 2 tiles off of that if I wanted to. I might just knock 1 off, because I do kind of like the idea of the station being just that little bit longer than the actual train. But yeah, it looks so much nicer, and it looks so much more realistic. One of the reasons I really like watching Zest Husky's series is because he does that. He builds 4 tile long stations, and on some of his lines he has one of the single car trains, the 153s I think are the single car sprinters, and the 158s are the express sprinters, which I think are the ones I'm actually using. But yeah, he has a service with just a 1 car DMU, and it does look quite funny, and it does look quite cute the way it goes along just by itself, but you know, that's real life. In Britain we do have 1 car trains. They might not be the most comfortable, they might not be the most suitable, but we do have them, and it's one of our little quirks. And I know that if you go to some of the countries in mainland Europe, particularly on the branch lines up in the Alps, and also in countries like Austria, and in some cases France, Germany, most of the countries that are within the Alps but not actually in the Alps itself, there are lots of little branch lines with only 1 car trains. I have to admit that the mainland European lines are normally run by more modern trains, which are quite nice. But little railcar services are quite nice, and they're easy to run. So I would like to replicate that as well. So I will be building little branch lines that join up to this main line out of GSJ, and I will also be doing the same on Friday with the Great Western line out of GSP, and running these fixed formation trains, because it does make life so much easier, and it's just so much nicer to be able to sit and watch these trains, especially the ones with deliveries on as well, because deliveries on this game have been done exceptionally well. The artists who have created these trains have done a fantastic job. Each livery, despite the fact that it's all pixelated and it's all little sprites and you don't expect there to be that much level of detail, but there is, and that's what makes it so cool. Like even the East Midlands Trains ones, they've got the livery spot on, the little cab swooshes of the red and the orange, the little blue line that runs underneath the windows on the carriages, they're all there, and it looks amazing. And they, the detail is on all of the DMUs and all of the meridians as well. So I probably won't use that many HSTs. I might do, again for realism's sake, some of the lines I'll operate mostly using meridians, but I might just throw 1 HST in, so it looks like the company doesn't have enough meridians, so they've hired in an HST and painted it in the livery of East Midlands Trains, just so that they can run it as one of their trains. I know at the moment Virgin East Coast, they've been having some problems with their HSTs over the last couple of years, so they've actually been hiring in trains from cross country and East Midlands Trains. So there's been East Midlands Trains liveried HSTs running into King's Cross, which is I imagine if you're waiting for a Virgin train and an East Midlands train rolls in, you'd be scratching your head a little bit wondering why that's the case. But hey, you can't just replace a livery for a train that you've borrowed for a day, because that's unfeasible. But I do like that idea of maybe having a little bit of a mismatch going on with trains as well. So you'll have I really like the idea of doing this with Crossrail. So you'll have the little Voyagers running along in not Crossrail, cross country. So you have the little Voyagers running along with the cross country livery, and then every now and then I'll just throw an HST in as well. I still haven't seen if there's Class 170s, the little Turbo Stars. I would like to be able to use them as well if possible, for realism's sake again. Because on this game, I'm not too worried about annoying passengers by not having enough capacity on the train. If I was running a real-life railway, then yes, I would be increasing capacity wherever I could. But on this game, it's not as important to me. But as I say, it's nice to be able to have a train that's half the length, but also, in some cases, more capacity. Anyway, have I missed anything out? I don't think I have, so I can just start talking about what's on the screen now. You can see I'm just setting up a little local service as well that's going to run between Nut Hill and Denston. Now this is the one, as I say, Denston is a hub for local services, and this is a very good example of that. There will be other local services that run to the south of Denston and also branching off different branch lines. I've sort of planned out a couple of diverging lines that would come off of this main running line. I haven't gone ahead and built them just yet. I might do that off camera and then just show you about it in the next episode. That sentence made no sense. I might show you it in the next episode, or at some point in the future. But this little service that I'm planning out here is an all-stopper. And actually, I mean, I thought the route between GSJ and Denston was a long one in terms of the number of stops, but the line between Nut Hill and Denston is much longer, and there's far more stops. And to be honest, I think I might need to get more trains. I think I've scheduled 8 to run on that line at the moment, and that to me feels like a lot for what's supposed to be a little local, not really service that much line. But it looks like I'm going to need more just to sort of get it up to the state where it's almost meeting demand, but still falling short. Because I do kind of like that idea of, obviously, if I was to run a railway company in real life, I'd want it to be efficient, and I'd also want it to be popular. I wouldn't want people disliking it. So I would try and run as many trains as possible on the line, and also have as many trains with as high a capacity as possible. So metro style trains like the Adventures that are going into Crossrail, also the trains they use on London Overground, they're perfect for short distance commuter lines because you can get as many people into the carriages as possible. But I also like the idea of having trains that you can just imagine people standing on the platform with a running start to try and cram themselves into the carriage before the doors shut, just so they can make sure they actually get on board the train. I do like that idea. There's something about it. I guess it's just the feeling of that's a British rail. That's how we're run right now. There is that kind of... It's kind of a contradiction, the way the UK rail network is run, because it's one of the most efficient in the world in terms of train movement. I've mentioned this before, how many different franchises share tracks, and if one train gets delayed, then it cascades all the way back through all the different trains that are due to run on that rail. But when everything runs smoothly, you go to a place like Birmingham and there are trains coming in and out and here, there and everywhere, and there's always a train moving, and it works so well. And then you have British Rail's safety record. We've had incidents, there's always been crashes. There were 4 derailments last month, but the reason, like, I only know about them because I read about them in my magazine. The reason the majority of people won't know about them is because there were no fatalities, no injuries. The only thing that happened really was the train came off the track and a couple of people were treated for shock. That's it. The safety record in the UK is second to none, really. So it always baffles me about how we can be so good at things like that, but so bad at things like making a train run on time. I don't know. Anyway, I've actually talked over the length of this video, so I'm going to have to try and find some extra footage to try and make up the gap. I thought I had more time to talk, but there you go. So I've covered the 2 basic points of today's episode. We're going back to the basics from now on. We're going back to railways. We're going back to 4-track, 2-track main lines, getting trains moving, trying to actually build a timetable of services. That's something that I want to focus on, because I have sort of zoomed out a lot and built these huge main lines, whereas I do want to zoom in a little bit more and start looking at individual services and individual lines, and you know, you're going from point A to point B, how would you get there, that kind of thing. It's almost like catering to the passenger. And then I've also talked about fixed formations as well. I think I'll talk about that more next episode as well. And I've also got this slated that I'm going to reveal the plans, or some of the plans, for episode 200. I think I might release a little bit per episode, just to keep you guys waiting, because I'm evil like that. But apart from that, guys, I am going to end the episode here, so thank you very much for watching. Don't forget to leave a like if you enjoyed the video, and of course if you're enjoying the series, drop some comments down below with ideas for future episodes. If you haven't already subscribed to the channel, be sure to hit that subscribe button. If you have already subscribed to the channel, thank you guys for your continued support. And until next time, I need to reach my mouse. There we go. Until next time, I will see you soon.